let's talk about Portland for a minute, because Portland's a very interesting place, a very progressive place. It used to be one of the most livable cities in the world until Ted Wheeler got in charge of it, because Ted Wheeler is sympathetic to the radical left, and this has been completely consistent throughout his entire career as the mayor of Portland. So we'll begin in 2017, where there had been persistent riots and incidents in Portland for years featuring radical left-wingers, and with the rise of Black Lives Matter, this all coalesced into quite a revolutionary-looking movement. And as you can see, it's just one example in 2017 of more rioting, fires, burning, people being attacked on the streets, things like that. And Ted Wheeler was like, oh, this is atrocious, but did very little about this, and seems to have constantly undermined the police at every turn. And in response to this, you had the Proud Boys, who decided that they would go and have their own rallies in Portland. Since they're going to be overtly left-wing rallies being held there, well, they should be able to hold their own right-wing rallies. And Ted Wheeler said no. He would refuse to grant them permits to have their rallies based on their views. And when someone said, well, hang on a second, they have First Amendment protections in the United States, assuming Portland is still a part of the United States, because, I mean, they have had their own exclusionary zones at some point. But Ted Wheeler just came out and said, well, hate speech isn't covered by the First Amendment. Yeah, it is. That's exactly the point of the First Amendment, is that there is no such thing as hate speech. Hate speech is something you have post hoc concocted from your progressive values, and this is still something that is constitutionally protected in the United States. The Washington Post, thankfully, was just like, yeah, he's wrong, actually, legally wrong, because this has precedence, and he's just not correct. This obviously is informed by his own political biases. And in 2017, again, still, Antifa weren't going to give him any credit for the amount of support he had given them over the years, and they started targeting his house, which can't have been nice. Ted Wheeler tweeted out, sad to come home the second night in a row with protesters in my front yard flipping me, my wife and child off, and now shouting threats. Photos and videos posted to social media show a handful of demonstrators outside of his home with refuse, with messages like "a cab," which means all cops are bastards, and outlines of bodies and chalk littering the sidewalk in front of the mayor's precisely manicured lawn, as if the police in Portland are just gunning down black people in the street or something, right?
The reason I was laughing is because it's just him being like, oh, how horrible for me to come home and have to deal with this. Yeah, what about everyone else?
Exactly, what about everyone else? And then there was a famous incident in 2018 where Antifa were blocking traffic and acting as if they had taken over a section of the city and directing traffic and intimidating motorists and things like this. It was all quite awful. And Ted Wheeler basically allowed it to happen. He came under fire over a viral video showing these protesters blocking traffic and harassing drivers, but says he supports the decision by the police to watch from a distance without getting involved. I was appalled by what I saw on the video, but I support the police bureau's decision not to intervene.
I support law enforcement not enforcing the law.
Yes, that's exactly what he's saying. He doesn't like watching Antifa bullying and harassing people in the streets, threatening them, and if they weren't driving off, presumably they would have assaulted them. But he's not going to do anything about it, and he supports the police standing by, because this has been his attitude.
You can see there's a unknown journalist. The video was posted by journalist Andy No, showed protesters, including members of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, blocking the intersection.
Yeah.
Just
it's mad.
It's interesting looking back and being like, well, Andy could report on the ground.
Yeah, back in the day, when Andy was not too famous and stigmatized. But anyway, so yeah, moving on. This is a constant theme throughout Ted Wheeler's tenure in Portland. In 2018, he ordered police officers to stand down, allowing protesters to menace ICE employees for 6 weeks, according to the agency's employees, who sent a cease and desist letter to the city on Monday. How mad is that? So obviously, the Abolish ICE protesters harassing the Immigration and Custom Enforcement officers, and Ted Wheeler's like, yeah, well, the police aren't going to get involved in that, so the police aren't going to protect the citizens, they're not going to protect government institutions. What are they going to protect? What is the purpose
My
of
house.
Not even. They weren't there with the protesters there. Like, this is the thing. Ted Wheeler seems to have been, and he definitely is, a radical left-winger, and he supports the general theme of what's being promoted: defund the police. But anyway, so in 2018, the Portland Council, he in fact proposed a method of increasing the power of police to control violent political brawls on the street, and the council themselves rejected this. And so that's a very interesting contradiction, isn't it? A man who constantly undermines the police and supports them when they don't deploy, obviously under his auspices, and yet still he is trying to accrue to himself more power to use them, even though he doesn't. What's he going to use them for?
He's going to take that power away from sensible people.
Exactly. But anyway, the Portland City Council, obviously very left-wing, and they were like, no. So that's useful. But in 2018, he was claiming, I didn't hinder the police. He was obviously accused a lot by various institutions in Portland of being in the way of the police, and he said, no, this is nonsense. You can't prove I did. But in 2019, 50-plus police resigned because of Ted Wheeler. And this is from the Gateway Pundit, with using various sources inside the Portland Police Department. Just tell them about the people they know who have been resigning. Why? Because he's constantly undercutting the police's authority. And it's because he is constantly associating with those people who say, all cops are bastards, defund the police. The United States is a white supremacist project. And so in 2020, and now this happened before, but I couldn't find the clip. There was a clip in 2018 where he was at a Black Lives Matter protest, and he was trying to speak surrounded by all these young protesters, and they were just booing and throwing things at him, and he had to basically hightail it out. But this happened again in 2020 when he was trying to address Black Lives Matter protesters amid the unrest in the city. He said, "I stand with you," to jeers from the crowd. Like, Ted, you are the authority. They are opposing. You can't join them. I don't have to tell you this. It'd be like Jews for Nazi Germany. It'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, they're not going to accept you. He demanded the federal officers leave the city. Although this was when Donald Trump, because of all the uprising that had been happening in Portland, Donald Trump and federal agents had been sent there to try and preserve something about the peace.
Because the state refused to send reinforcements,
Yes.
the feds had to send reinforcements,
Yes.
meaning it came from Trump.
Yes.
Trump was the only one defending this.
Yes. Trump was the only person arguing for law and order in Portland.
The way this was solved in the end, and they took the feds out for a bit, I don't know what the situation is now, is that I think it was after he was unelected or something, then they sent in state forces.
Yes.
So state officers went in instead of federal.
Exactly. As soon as they weren't Donald Trump's. But he of course, was condemning them. We didn't want them. We didn't ask for them. They're not trained for what they're being asked to do. We want them to leave because you want more violence and destruction in Portland. Because it's not like there hasn't been enough. But I'm just skimming over a lot of this because otherwise we'd be here all day. And so in 2020, his $840,000 condo was attacked and the building was set on fire. And so he was forced to move for the protection of other people. He said, "It would be best for me and for everyone else's safety and peace for him to move from the building that the rioters had tried to torch on his 58th birthday." Why are you palling around with these people, Ted? Like, in what world do you think you're going to be accepted by these people? You go to their protest, they hate you. They try to burn your building. Like, in what way are you thinking, yeah, maybe all the cops are bastards, maybe Black Lives do matter, and maybe the Antifa are just anti-fascists? Anyway, by September 2020, after 100 days of a consistent straight 100 days of Antifa riots, and even the Associated Press have gotten like, yeah, these were pretty violent. Portland had
There were
descended
very explosives and IEDs at one point. So.
I know, and they were attacking, courthouses and things like this, literally burning down government buildings. I mean, this is just totally unacceptable. Why do I have to say that? It's just on the face of it. But of course the shooting of Daniel Aronson by Michael Reinhold, this was basically him admitting that this is terrible. There's no way of getting around it. You couldn't get rid of the fact that this was just everywhere. And eventually, the next year, in fact, the beginning of January, Ted Wheeler got punched by an Antifa member in public. Like, they saw him at a restaurant, a group of them gathered to harass him, and one of them got up to his face and then punched him in the face.
Yeah, they punched a Nazi.
Basically.
Look, if you endorse that statement, that's what's going to happen to you.
The rioting continued, and it's getting out of control. And finally, in 2021, Ted is saying, well, look, I'm going to push back harder against anarchists and Antifa radicals after another riot rocked the city on New Year's Eve, admitting the months-long effort to stem the violence had failed.
After you got rid of Donald Trump.
Yeah, of
Donald
course.
Trump's gone.
of course. But this is the point. He has gestated this radical movement in his city. He has tried to ingratiate himself with it because his politics obviously align in some way with theirs, and it's just his position that prevents him from joining them. And this is something he has done. This is something Ted Wheeler did to Portland. He allowed this to happen. And he undercut the police at every turn, as we keep saying.
The Democrats did this to the United States, across the United States. So, I mean, that timeline there, think about it.
Yeah.
Donald Trump gets in office 2016,
Yep.
and then Antifa blows up in Washington and then in Portland
Yep.
and whatnot. And then it goes on and goes on and goes on until Joe Biden gets in, and then all of a sudden it's got to be dealt with.
Yes, that's exactly right. But
These people knew what they were doing.
yeah, but in the particular case of Portland, Ted Wheeler knew what he was doing, and he completely supported this the whole way. So in March 2021, they're still burning US flags, storming courthouses, and fighting with the police. Apparently, they set fire to a federal courthouse in downtown Portland. Andy No tweeted out, there are still people inside that, by the way. Good to know, I suppose. Not that Ted Wheeler cares, or should have cared before. And in April, this is in March, and in April, he said, we need to take the city back.
From who? The idea, the myth that is Antifa.
Yes. This was reported by the Washington Post, but I don't have the link on screen, but it's okay. But basically, he said that he wanted the residents' help for putting an end to violent protests that have erupted in recent weeks, and urge the public to stand together to take the city back. They want to burn, they want to bash, they want to intimidate, they want to assault, said Ted Wheeler on Friday.
When was this not true?
Yeah. But
What year in the past 4 was that not the case?
Why would you previously tell the police not to engage? Why would you previously try to go and hang out with these people and tell them that what they're doing is correct and just? Why did you do this? And it's only when they're literally about to burn down your house, after burning down loads of courthouses and beating loads of people and murdering people on your streets, you're like, yeah, maybe we need to take the streets back from this violent communist insurrection movement.
I mean, terrorists.
Yeah, actual
sorry,
terrorists.
it's a terrorist uprising.
Yeah, it is a terrorist
They
uprising.
kill people, they bomb buildings. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like,
they couldn't get much more like ISIS if they were trying.
yeah. I mean, have you seen the footage of the ID they threw at the courthouse?
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you want? But I guess they wanted Donald Trump out, that's what they wanted.
They tried to set fire to his home. I mean, what more? But anyway, so yes, yesterday, he says, our job is to unmask them, arrest them, and prosecute them. And asking the public to contact the police and provide them with information about the rioters, write down their license plates and numbers, or film them when they commit acts of vandalism. Why did that have to take about 6 years for you to come to that position, though, Ted? Why? Why couldn't that have been done on day one? Because on day one, the rioting was wrong. What they were trying to do was totally immoral and breaking the law. So why not do it on day one? Why did it take 6 years and for you to be personally threatened? Because when it wasn't threatening you personally, you seemed to be on its side. But anyway, good luck with that, because it turned out yesterday the entire rapid response Riot team decided to resign. Because screw you, that's why. You know, you want you got to go stop the riots, stop the riots. What, the riots you encouraged with the police that you have been undermining. Why the hell should they? But anyway, so post-millennial Andy No, I believe, reports that within the rapid response team within the Portland Police Department, which is a volunteer outfit, so these are people who have volunteered to be the front line against the communist terrorists, have all said no because of the indictment of Officer Corey Budworth for he's alleged to have used excessive force when dealing with Antifa rioters, which sounds like a contradiction in terms to me. But obviously, I haven't looked into the case of it, but to be honest with you, I don't care. I just don't care.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah. What does excessive force look like when you're stopping murderous communist terrorists?
I mean, shooting them if they're unarmed?
He didn't do that.
So, I don't know what else.
I mean, like, on the night of August 18th, 2020, Antifa militants threw a Molotov cocktail into the county sheriff's department headquarters.
I think that's maybe the 10th now, if I'm counting correctly.
I mean, it's unreal.
They thrown, I think it's 3 lines of police officers. They threw one or set fire to one of their own.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember his feet on fire.
Yeah.
Dancing guy.
So he was indicted, and Corey Budworth, was indicted and charged with 1 count of 4th-degree assault, a misdemeanor, by their own standards. So, okay, so what? He beat up an Antifa kid
He was throwing Molotovs.
who was part of a riot in which Molotovs were thrown.
Police firebombed. Police pushed a guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, good. good. You know, I don't think he's done anything wrong here. If these people are out rioting, and I mean, as if they're not being violent, as if they're not being like wildly, unacceptably violent. But anyway, he was accused of hitting an activist with a baton. Basically, it's like good. And
you're dealing with violent terrorists who have firebombed, IED'd, and shot people in the streets.
Yeah, but don't.
Like, but don't use a baton.
Yeah, don't shove someone over with your shield. No, just put them in their place, right? The loss of life and property that the people of Portland have had to suffer under because of Ted Wheeler and his permissiveness with this is unreal, and they deserve everything they get. But apparently Ted Wheeler was begging the Riot team not to resign. We are told from Drew, if we can go to the next link, John, because I can't remember his full name, Drew Hernandez. He's a pundit and says, my insiders say Ted Wheeler was on a Zoom call today begging the Riot response team not to resign because Antifa has a riot scheduled tonight. Enjoy, Ted. Well...
You get what you deserve.
Exactly. Maybe, Ted, you shouldn't have been stigmatizing the police alongside with the leftist terrorists. That was probably a mistake, and maybe you shouldn't have treated them as if they were the problem and criminalized them when they were doing what was necessary to resist this incursion.
I mean, the best episode out of the entire saga in Portland, I have to say, was after the election when Antifa went down to the Democratic headquarters of Portland and just destroyed it.
Yep.
Like, right, you do get what you deserve.
Yeah.
You and your people have been promoting this from day one, you know, encouraging these terrorists. When the terrorists smash up your stuff, your problem.
You're hanging out with people who are literally opposed to your constitutional democracy. They see you as a weak traitor for engaging in it. And you're like, oh, well, I'm going to go hang out with those people. No, they're going to abuse you. Then they're going to assault you. Then they're going to drive you off. Then they're going to try and set fire to your house and your city, try and set up an autonomous zone that has seceded from the United States. And then when you're like, oh, police, I know I said you're all bad people, but could you go deal with this? They're like, no.
And if they had succeeded, they'd put you up against the wall.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If they had the power, they would definitely have put them up against the wall. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.